The story of silver coins in Britain doesn't begin with a king or a Roman emperor. It starts much earlier with the Celtic tribes of the Iron Age. Around 2,000 years ago, these groups began to create their own coins, inspired by those they saw from across the Channel in Gaul. The first ones weren't even made of silver, but gold staters. However, as trade and society developed, silver became an essential metal for smaller, more practical transactions. These early coins were not the perfectly round, uniform discs we know today. They were often small, cast pellets of silver known as potans, or struck pieces with wonderfully abstract designs. What I find so captivating about these Celtic coins is their artistry. The designs were not meant to be realistic portraits. Instead, they featured stylized horses, boars, and swirling patterns that had deep cultural meaning for the people who made them. You might see a horse with disjointed legs, or a face made from crescents and dots. These weren't mistakes, they were a unique artistic language. For a collector, finding a Celtic silver coin is like holding a piece of Britain's prehistoric soul. It's a direct link to the tribes like the Iceni, led by the famous Boudica, or the Atrebates in the south. Making these coins was a painstaking process. Silver was a precious commodity, and minting was not yet a centralized state-run operation. Small workshops would have melted down silver, perhaps from traded Roman denarii or jewellery, and then struck the metal between two dies. One die, the anvil die, would be set into a block of wood, while the other, the punch die, was held by hand and struck with a hammer. This method is why no two Celtic coins are ever exactly alike. Each one tells a story of its own creation, with off-centre strikes or faint details revealing the hand of its maker. Today, these coins are highly sought after, not just for their rarity, but for their immense historical significance. They represent the very beginning of a monetary system in Britain, a time before written records were common. When you hold a silver unit of the Iceni, you are connecting with a society on the cusp of monumental change. It's a tangible piece of evidence from a mysterious and powerful era. These small silver discs were used for paying tribute, for high-status gifts, and for trade, marking the first steps on a long journey of British coinage that continues to this day. When the Romans successfully invaded Britain in AD 43, they brought with them more than just legions and straight roads. They introduced a sophisticated, centrally controlled monetary system that would completely transform the island. Suddenly, the abstract and varied Celtic coinage was replaced by the might of the Roman Empire, represented by the silver denarius. This was a coin used from the shores of the Mediterranean to the misty frontiers of Britannia. It was a tool of propaganda, a means of payment for soldiers, and a symbol of belonging to a vast and powerful empire. It was, in essence, the dollar of its day. The silver denarius was a world away from the Celtic coins it superseded. It was a coin of remarkable consistency and quality. Each one was struck with a portrait of the reigning emperor on the obverse, or head's side. This was a powerful statement. It meant that the face of Emperor Claudius, Nero, or Hadrian could be in the pocket of a merchant in Londinium or a soldier on the northern wall. The reverse side often depicted gods, goddesses, military victories, or public works, reinforcing messages of Roman power, piety, and prosperity. This was mass communication on a pocket-sized scale, and it was incredibly effective. The sheer volume of Roman silver coinage that flowed into Britain was staggering. Hordes of thousands of denarii are still being discovered by metal detectorists and archaeologists today, giving us a fantastic snapshot of the economy. These hoards were often buried in times of trouble, perhaps during a local uprising or the withdrawal of Roman troops, and never recovered by their owners. For collectors, these coins offer a wonderful opportunity. You can assemble a gallery of Roman emperors from Augustus to Constantine just through the silver coins found on British soil. Each portrait tells a story of a different reign, a different personality. After a few centuries, the silver denarius began to face problems. Successive emperors, needing to fund vast armies and lavish building projects, started to debase the coinage. This meant they mixed the silver with increasing amounts of cheaper metals like copper. By the late 3rd century, the coin that had once been almost pure silver was often just a copper core with a thin silver wash. This decline in quality mirrored the wider troubles facing the empire. When the Romans eventually departed Britain in the early 5th century, their sophisticated monetary system collapsed, leaving a void that would take centuries to fill. After the Romans left, Britain entered a period often called the Dark Ages. For a long time, the use of coins largely disappeared, and society reverted to a system of barter and trade. But as the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms began to form and grow in power, the need for a reliable currency returned. Around the 7th century, small, thick silver coins known as sciatas, or seats, started to appear. These were fascinating coins, often with strange runic inscriptions and intriguing designs, including what collectors affectionately call porcupines and fantastical beasts. They show a melting pot of influences, from lingering Roman ideas to Germanic and Christian art. It was in the late 8th century, however, that the true icon of Anglo-Saxon coinage was born, the silver penny. Introduced by powerful kings like Offa of Mercia, the penny was a broader, thinner coin than the seat. It was made of high-quality silver and would become the backbone of the English economy for the next 500 years. King Offa's pennies are particularly beautiful, often bearing elegant portraits and the name of the king and the moneyer, the person responsible for making the coin. This inclusion of the moneyer's name was a brilliant form of quality control, making someone personally accountable for the coin's weight and purity. The silver penny was a symbol of royal authority. Its production was tightly controlled, and mints were established in important towns or burghs across the various kingdoms. During the Viking invasions, a fascinating numismatic story unfolds. The Vikings, at first raiders, became settlers and rulers, and they began to mint their own silver pennies in areas they controlled, known as the Danelaw. These coins often imitated English designs, but sometimes included their own symbols like Thor's hammer or references to Viking leaders like Nut the Great, who would eventually become king of all England and unite the two traditions. For collectors, Anglo-Saxon pennies are a window into a formative period of English history. They trace the rise and fall of kingdoms, the struggle against the Vikings, and the eventual unification of England under kings like Aethelstan and Edgar. Finding a penny of Alfred the Great, for instance, is an incredible thrill. These coins are often rare and can be very valuable, but their true worth lies in the history they represent. Each small piece of silver tells a story of a king, a mint, and a moneyer from over 1,000 years ago, a time when England, as we know it, was just beginning to take shape. Following the Norman conquest in 1066, the silver penny continued its reign as the primary coin of the realm. William the Conqueror and his successors maintained the high standards of their Anglo-Saxon predecessors, understanding that a stable currency was vital for a stable kingdom. The designs, however, changed. The portraits became more stylized and less realistic, often showing a forward-facing bust of the king holding a scepter. One of the most famous medieval designs is the short cross penny, introduced by Henry II in 1180. This simple, effective design, with a cross on the reverse, was so successful that it was continued for nearly 70 years, long after Henry's death. One of the biggest challenges facing medieval monarchs was the crime of clipping. Because the pennies were made of precious silver, dishonest individuals would shave or clip tiny slivers of metal from the edges of the coins. Over time, a clipped coin would be noticeably smaller and lighter, but it would still be passed off at its face value. To combat this, a new design was introduced in 1279 by Edward I. Known as the long cross penny, it featured a cross that extended right to the edge of the coin. This made any clipping immediately obvious, as part of the cross would be missing. It was a simple but ingenious solution. The medieval period also saw the introduction of new silver denominations for the first time in centuries. While the penny was perfect for many transactions, its value was too high for buying everyday essentials like a loaf of bread. To solve this, pennies were often physically cut into halves or quarters to make halfpennies and farthings, four things. Under Edward I, the mint began to officially produce round silver halfpennies and farthings, along with a new, larger coin called the groat, which was worth 4 pence. This expansion of coinage made daily commerce much easier for ordinary people. For collectors, the medieval period offers a huge and fascinating field of study. You can trace the lineage of English kings from William I to Richard III through their silver pennies. The mint marks and slight variations in design allow for deep specialization. For example, a collector might focus solely on the pennies of Edward I, which were struck at numerous mints across England, Ireland, and even in his French territories. Each coin is a small piece of a much larger puzzle, telling the story of medieval life, trade, and the constant struggle to maintain a trustworthy currency. The Tudor dynasty, beginning with Henry VII in 1485, brought, a new level of artistry and prestige to English coinage. Henry VII introduced the very first realistic portraiture seen on English coins since Roman times. His silver groats and his new large silver coin, the testoon, which was actually the forerunner of the shilling, featured a striking, lifelike profile of the king. This was, a clear statement of power and modernity, moving away from those stylized, generic faces of the medieval period. These coins were of high-quality silver, reflecting the stability and wealth Henry VII brought to the kingdom after the Wars of the Roses. However, this golden age of silver was not to last. His son, Henry VIII, is, infamous in numismatic circles for what is known as the Great Debasement. To fund his extravagant lifestyle and those costly wars with France and Scotland, Henry desperately needed money. From 1544, he began to drastically reduce the amount of silver in his coins, replacing it with copper. The public quickly noticed, as the coins with a higher copper content would wear in a particular way. The silver plating would rub off the high points of the design, especially on the king's nose, revealing the copper beneath. This rather amusingly earned Henry the unflattering nickname Old Copper-Nose. The debasement had a disastrous effect on the economy. people lost confidence in the currency and prices soared. It was a problem that Henry's young son, Edward VI, inherited. During his short reign, further debasement occurred, with some coins containing as little as 25% silver. It fell to Queen Elizabeth I, who came to the throne in 1558 to restore the nation's financial honour. In a major undertaking, she recalled all the debased coins from circulation and issued a new currency of fine silver. She famously declared that this move was one of the key achievements of her reign, even having it inscribed on her tomb. For collectors, the Tudor period is a dramatic story of highs and lows. The beautiful fine silver coins of Henry VII and Elizabeth I stand in stark contrast to the debased issues of Henry VIII and Edward VI. Owning a copper-nose shilling is a tangible connection to one of the most turbulent economic periods in English history. Elizabeth I's silver coins, from the tiny halfpenny to the magnificent crown, are some of the most popular of any monarch. They feature her famous profile, which ages throughout her long reign, and represent a return to stability and a source of great national pride. The Stuart period was one of profound change and conflict, and this is vividly reflected in its silver coinage. The early Stuart kings, James I and Charles I, continued to issue hammered coins, made in much the same way they had been for centuries. The designs featured handsome portraits of the monarchs, often showing Charles I on horseback on the larger silver crown and half-crown coins. These pieces were works of art, but the handmade process meant that quality could be inconsistent, and clipping remained a persistent problem. A revolution in coin production, however, was just around the corner. The outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642 tore the country apart, and it had a dramatic impact on coinage. As King Charles I lost control of London and the Tower Mint, he was forced to set up emergency mints in royalist strongholds like Oxford, Bristol and Newark. These mints produced fascinating siege pieces. Lacking proper equipment and silver bullion, royalist commanders would simply take silver plate, donated by loyal gentry and colleges, and cut it into diamond, square or octagonal shapes. They would then stamp these crude pieces with a simple design indicating their value. These are some of the most evocative coins in British history. Meanwhile, in London, the parliamentarians were experimenting with new technology. A Frenchman named Nicholas Briot had been promoting the use of machinery to produce coins, and now his ideas were put into practice. The first machine-made, or milled coins, were produced under Oliver Cromwell as Lord Protector. These coins were perfectly round, with lettering on the edge, making them virtually impossible to clip or counterfeit. Although Cromwell's coins were not issued in large numbers, they set the standard for the future. When Charles II was restored to the throne in 1660, he fully embraced this new technology. From 1662 onwards, all British silver coins were milled. The age of hammered coinage, which had lasted for a millennium, was over. This was a pivotal moment. The new milled silver, from the crown down to the humble penny, was uniform, secure, and a symbol of a modernising nation. Collectors love this period for its sheer variety. You have the last of the hammered coins, the raw and desperate siege money of the Civil War, and the first of the beautiful, precisely engineered, milled coins. It is a collection that tells a story of a nation in turmoil, moving from medieval traditions into the machine age. The Georgian period, spanning the reigns of four kings named George from 1714 to 1830, was a time of relative stability and immense economic growth for Britain. However, for much of the 18th century, the Royal Mint experienced a strange and prolonged silver shortage. Silver was worth more as bullion on the open market in Europe and Asia than its face value as British coin, so newly minted crowns and shillings were often melted down and exported almost as soon as they were made. This meant that for decades, very few new silver coins were issued for circulation in Britain, creating a major problem for everyday trade. To fill the gap, the public and businesses got creative. A huge number of counterfeit coins appeared, but many of these were tolerated as they were the only small change available. The Bank of England also took an extraordinary step. It obtained a large quantity of Spanish silver dollars, which was circulating globally thanks to Spain's vast empire in the Americas. To make them legal tender in Britain, the bank countermarked the coins with a small oval punch of King George III's head. It was a practical, if rather odd-looking solution. People joked that it was two kings' heads for a crown's worth. Later, the Bank of England went a step further. It hired the engineer Matthew Boulton, a partner of James Watt, to use his powerful steam-powered presses to completely overstrike the Spanish dollars. The original Spanish design was flattened, and a new British design featuring a bust of George III and the Bank of England's name was stamped over the top. You can often still see faint traces of the underlying Spanish coin, which makes these pieces fascinating for collectors. These Bank of England dollars, along with smaller tokens issued by towns and businesses, kept the economy moving until the silver situation could be resolved. The solution came in 1816 with the Great Recoinage. After the Napoleonic Wars, the government reformed the currency, officially putting Britain on the gold standard. Silver coins were now token coinage, meaning their value was guaranteed by the state rather than by their intrinsic metal content. A huge new issue of beautifully designed silver coins, from the half-crown to the sixpence, flooded the country. These coins, featuring a magnificent St. George and the dragon design by Benedetto Pistrucci, were of a superb quality. They finally provided the stable and plentiful silver currency that the burgeoning Industrial Revolution demanded. The reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901 was the zenith of the British Empire, and its silver coinage reflected this global power and prestige. The coins of this era are some of the most popular and widely collected of all. This is partly because they were minted in enormous quantities, meaning many are still affordable today, but also because of their exceptional artistry and historical significance. The silver coins of Victoria's reign circulated across a vast empire on which, it was famously said, the sun never set. A shilling from London could turn up in Cape Town, Sydney, or Hong Kong. One of the most remarkable things about Victorian silver is how it documents the Queen's long life. We can trace her journey from a young girl to a revered empress through her coin portraits. The young head portrait, used from 1838, is a beautiful and graceful depiction. This was followed by the Jubilee head in 1887, showing a mature queen wearing a small crown. Finally, the old head or widow head portrait from 1893 depicts the familiar veiled monarch of her later years. Collecting these different portraits is like having a small silver photo album of the 19th century's most iconic figure. The Victorian era also saw the introduction of a new and controversial silver coin, the florin. First issued in 1849, it was worth 2 shillings, or 1/10 of a pound. This was an early experiment with decimalisation. The first version, known as the Godless Florin, is famous because the traditional Latin inscription Dei Gratia, by the grace of God, was omitted. Public outcry was so great that the design was quickly changed, making the original issue a rare and sought-after piece for collectors. The era also produced the stunning Gothic crown and florin, featuring an ornate, medieval-inspired portrait of the Queen that is widely considered a masterpiece of numismatic art. The sheer quality and consistency of Victorian silver set a new global standard. The coins were struck at the Royal Mint in London, but also at branch mints in Australia, which were open to process the gold and silver discovered there. These coins often carry small mint marks, an S for Sydney or M for Melbourne, which adds another layer of interest for collectors. Owning a Victorian silver coin is to hold a piece of a confident industrial and imperial Britain. It's a tangible link to an era of incredible invention, expansion and change that shaped the modern world. The 20th century marked the beginning of the end for silver coinage as a daily currency in Britain. For the first half of the century, coins continued much as they had in Victorian times, made from the traditional 92.5% sterling silver. However, the immense economic strain of 2 world wars changed everything. The cost of the First World War led the government in 1920 to reduce the silver content of coins from 92.5% to just 50%. This was a major debasement, and while the coins looked the same when new, they tarnished differently and had a less satisfying feel. This 50% silver coinage continued until after the Second World War. The final chapter for circulating silver came in 1947. To repay war debts to the United States, which were to be paid in silver bullion, the UK government decided to remove all silver from its coinage. From that year on, the silver coins in people's pockets were actually made from cupro nickel, a silvery-looking but far cheaper alloy of copper and nickel. An era that had lasted for over 1,000 years was over. The silver coins of the past were officially withdrawn, though many remained in circulation for years, creating a treasure hunt for sharp-eyed people checking their change. The next great change was decimalisation in 1971. The familiar system of pounds, shillings and pence was replaced by a new one with 100 new pence to the pound. This meant the end for beloved silver coins like the shilling and the florin, which were replaced by the smaller 5 pence and 10 pence coins. While this was a sad moment for traditionalists, it opened up a new world for coin collectors. The Royal Mint, no longer needing to produce silver for circulation, began to focus on creating special commemorative coins specifically for the collector's market. These are often struck in sterling silver or even finer silver, reviving the precious metals connection to British coinage. Today, the world of the silver coin collector is incredibly diverse. Some people are completists, trying to find one of every coin from a particular reign. Others specialize in a single denomination, like the shilling, and collect examples from every monarch. The Royal Mint now fuels this passion by issuing annual proof and brilliant uncirculated sets, as well as popular silver bullion series like the Britannia and the Queen's Beasts. Coins are found everywhere, at specialist dealers, in auction houses, at coin fairs, and increasingly online. It is a hobby that connects us to history, art and economics, all through these small, captivating